Soei was in high spirits. He had been watching Rimura's battle in secret, one that Rimura had just won in crushing fashion. It was a lucky break for him. Despite taking on Vildor and Valgrand at the same time, Rimura seemed to have the upper hand throughout. He even consumed Vildor and evolved himself mid-battle. That let him overpower Valgrand in the end, despite an onslaught that Soei would have been helpless against. But it seemed that the extent of Rimura's newfound strength wasn't something visible to the naked eye. Even through the soul corridor that connected them, Soei couldn't sense anything. He was sure he wasn't the only one curious about that. Regardless, Diablo hadn't made any moves right up to the end. Even now, Soei was sure he was by Rimura's side. He wanted to call him a bastard for hogging the best seat in the house, but he also understood that Diablo had a valid rationale for his actions, so he couldn't openly complain about it. Tessarasa, too, was pretty angry about it. She had flatly declared her intention to stay, but when Soei thought about why, it gave him a lot of mixed feelings. Even so, he still didn't object to it, because he knew what her motivations were. The Valgrand here, perhaps realizing her disadvantage, had moved to protect Lidor, even as she was fighting Rimura. There was no guarantee that she'd stay obediently in her gate until the other 7 were destroyed. As cunning as Tessarasa is, there's no way she didn't see the possibility. But if she didn't point it out, that suggests she believes she can handle her alone. I can hardly see her defeating Lady Valgrand, but she's certainly confident, at least. Soei had an accurate grasp of Tessarasa's intentions. She was quite likely positioning herself for a rematch with Valgrand. That was someone Soei knew he couldn't beat, so he thought being a bit jealous of her was perfectly valid. Besides, he thought, Benimaru must have read Tessarasa's thoughts and given them at least his tacit approval. Not even he was a match for Valgrand, after all she was the very incarnation of fire, and Benimaru's fire-based moves would do nothing against her. He may not even stop her for very long and, so Tessarasa was much more qualified for the job. Soei, by the way, would likely be able to stop Valgrand for a few seconds at best. With her spatial control skills, none of Soei's trademark techniques would work at all. He wouldn't even be allowed any escape, none that didn't involve immolation in the flames. He fully understood that, which didn't thrill him, but he still had to give up his seat to Tessarasa. So he devoted himself to his work with a complex mix of feelings. He was overjoyed to see Rimura win, but increasingly dissatisfied with his own lack of power. He had absolute orders from Rimura to kill his enemy, though, and he wouldn't hesitate to follow them. For Soei, that was just a natural thing to do. Let's get this over with so I can hurry back to Sir Rimura's side. His loyalty to Rimura soaring higher than ever, Soei obeyed his racing heart's desires and ran through the gate. The enemy was in sight. Soei went right for him. All of the gates had the same battle arena inside, and in the center of this one stood his target. Hey. I'm fighting you, Ben. This was Gardner, the 4th rank single digit. Since you're here and all, let me introduce myself. I am Gardner, entrusted with the protection of Emperor Lidor. I don't think we'll be together for long, but I hope you enjoy it, huh? Gardner eyed Soei, trying to gauge his worth. He was tingling with a cruel, hidden desire, wondering just how he could best torment this target. Soei met him with silence. But not entirely. He let out a sigh after a short pause. So I am losing precious time in order to dispose of you. He spat the words out in disgust. Gardner wasn't about to let it go unaddressed. What? My name is Soei. If you say that you'll surrender, I'll accept it, but you won't, will you? Of course not. This chip on Soei's shoulder incensed Gardner. This only locked him in Soei's trap before the fight even began, but he was unaware of that. Soei, was it? I've heard of you. Kondo was looking into you before, but you're trying to run your own little intelligence bureau over in the land of monsters, aren't you? Which means you're not suited for direct combat. Of course, Kondo's research wasn't as vague as all that. Gardner knew that Soei had a certain level of ability, but, even knowing that, he was taunting him right now. He didn't think he needed to in order to win, but if it made this Soei lose his cool, then all the better. It was, of course, a shallow tactic, and one that was meaningless if he tried it against someone like Soei. Imbecile. Enough of this nonsense. Let's get on with it. In this short period of time, Soei had already identified Gardner's full abilities. Gardner, unaware of this, recklessly slashed at him. His weapon of choice was an azure dragon blade held in both hands, thicker and larger than a knife, difficult to handle, but powerful in the right hands. He made it flow in a magnificent dance-like motion, as he unleashed a flurry of strikes, a mixture of strength, sharpness, and Gardner's own polished skills. But it didn't work on Soei. Without warning, he dove into the shadows, Gardner's sword slicing through the air. His momentum threw him off balance, and Soei was ready. The bullet that flew out from the shadow at Gardner's feet lodged itself in the chest of his prey. Gah! He collapsed, coughing up blood. Appearing from the shadows to finish him off, Soei revealed the small Walther P99 handgun. He had recently obtained one of the prototypes that Rimuru had Kajin built for him, practicing how to fire it from shadow space, and now the results were as clear as the bullet that shot through Gardner's heart. Too easy. No matter how strong a fighter someone was, if you caught them off guard, you could finish them off with a single blow. That was Soei's pet theory, but he understood that this just wasn't possible for some opponents. Gardner, however, was not one of them, and his plan had just worked brilliantly. The bullet he just fired, after all, was infused with all of Soei's own skills, the ultra speed and insta-kill, from his unique skill Shadow Striker, but also poison, paralysis, and corrosion effects. Ultra speed made the bullet begin its journey at dozens of times the speed of sound, and with insta-kill added to its already lethal effects, it could even destroy the spiritual body of a life form. Between that and the various status ailments, Gardner's death was absolutely certain. Everyone, not just Soei, would have thought so. However, you let your guard down, fool. A voice shot out from behind Soei as he started walking back toward the gate. Before he could react, his head was severed, the azure dragon blade emerging from his chest. Ah, these tricks are such a pain. They're fine for killing clever bastards like him, but it's no fun if everything gets decided in an instant, you know. These words were spoken, needless to say, by the supposedly dead Gardner. The corpse was still lying on the ground, but he was still standing here, perfectly fine. That could be chalked up to the special ability he acquired for Ludora had used alternate to grant him the skill parallel existence. Unlike Valgrand, who boasted a vast amount of magicules, Gardner's was about average for a saint-level person. That put him up there with an awakened demon lord, but he couldn't create multiple replications of himself at once. Just one at a time was his limit, but that was still enough. Thanks to that, no matter how cunning his opponent was, they'd never be able to tell the fake from the real thing. They were both real by definition. So Gardner's typical winning strategy was to lure his foe into a trap, then use a replication as a decoy while he attacked with his main body. It was a proven tactic, but he didn't like using it much. He was more into tormenting people as they begged for their lives. This approach killed them before things even got to that level. Hey, you alive? As if, right? Despite his complaints, Gardner didn't forget his job. He had to ensure that anyone who went through this gate was killed, so he needed to check up on Soei. But as he was about to, a cold voice said, I knew it in his ear. Soei's body, still decapitated and pierced through the heart, dissipated into a black mist. Damn it. By the time Gardner noticed and shouted out, it was already too late. If he hadn't lost his composure during his first engagement with Soei, he might have realized that he was dealing with a replication the whole time, but no point debating what ifs now. What mattered was that Gardner failed. That, and the consequences he would see from it. A simple replication is good enough to use as a decoy. It appears you are wasting a great power there. Soei's voice echoed coldly. It was a valid criticism, one that stabbed Gardner in the heart. Gardner had, in fact, met Valgrand before. Not long after he became a saint, he learned that the marshal was a beautiful woman, a bit of info that convinced him he could win in a fight. He instead tasted abject defeat by one of her parallel existences, as she sat elegantly on the throne, serving as little more than a diversion for her. But it was this skull of hers that Gardner was amazed by. He craved it badly, and now he had a form of it. Even the azure dragon blade he loved was a gift from her. But Soei had known all of that. Gardner had been dancing on his palm from the beginning. God damn. Gardner screamed at him. This extreme situation was shaking him to the core. If you begin to doubt your abilities, it'll start to affect you, and the more ultimate that ability, the worse it becomes. It was a given that Soei would aim for that. If you understand now, then die. With that, Soei tried to summon his unique skill Shadow Striker. Then Gardner took out one of his hidden moves. Hurrah. Haha, about that. Each one is my real body. I will die too, but now I can take you with me. Multiple parallel existences began their attack at once. All were the real thing, so defeating any given individual would be meaningless. It was the ultimate attack, when Gardner burned his very life away to execute. It happened in the blink of an eye, too, making it hard for Soei to evade, as he tried to finish the battle with Shadow Striker. The greatest weakness of Soei's replications was that only his own main body could activate unique skills. Soei could control multiple replications at once, but there was no way to compensate for that weakness. Such was the difference between a replication and a parallel existence, so it was to be expected. Soei could make it look like he could pull that off if he was close enough to a replication, but even that would come at a time lag that could be lethal against a stronger opponent. With someone like that, only Soei's main body could strike the final blow. Soei thought he had been caught off guard. The most dangerous moment of a fight, as everybody knew, was right when you were about to finish the job. You could never let your guard down then, and his failure to do that even though he knew better was a shameful mistake. Forgive me, Sir Rimuru. I promise you I will survive this and make amends later. Soei prepared for Gardner's final onrush. He was not allowed to die, he had to survive this. But then. You are not forgiven, Soei. Thus I will grant you power as well. Soei thought he heard a strange voice. Wait, that voice. No, don't. Instantly he understood this voice must never be thought over or pursued in any way. Perhaps it was an unwise thing for the leader of an intelligence department to do, but Soei made the decision without further hesitation. That is fine. The name of the ability you will gain is. At once, Soei understood this power as if he were born with it. At the same time, within this field of consciousness that seemed to stretch out 1,000,000 times over, he realized that his replications were now separate bodies. It only meant one thing: Soei had also acquired parallel existence. Hi ha 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 ha. I'm going to die, but it's the end for you, too. Taste my. Is it the end of your will, then? What? No. This has to be your main body. That it is. And so is this one. If you understand that, then die. God damn you. This time, Gardner truly had nothing left. 1,000 shadow death. Soei's shadow stretched out, turning into 1,000 arms that promptly seized Gardner. This was the effective Eye of the Moon in play, one of the skills offered by the ultimate gift Tsukuyomi, Lord of Moonshade. It granted Soei the ability to manipulate shadows at will, and nothing could have matched him better. He could use shadows to investigate any part of the world he wanted, and wherever shadows existed, he could easily move to them instantly. Combine this with parallel existence, and he could create multiple pairs of arms to attack people freely from the shadows, an effective battle tactic. Go ahead, Gardner shouted as he was held down. Gloat over your victory. You will never beat Lady Valgrind, Sir Granite. But his life came to an end before he could finish the thought, snuffed out by Soei's insta-kill. Sir Rimuru already took care of Lady Valgrind. This Granite you mentioned is being attended to by Benimaru, one far stronger than I suppose, much like me. Ah, but that's no concern of yours. Without further comment, Soei melted away, allowing Gardner to be swallowed by the darkness.